Welcome to another edition of E.W. Jackson for America. Great to be with you again this morning. I am coming to you live on Friday morning, October the 24th, and we've got plenty to talk about. So this is Friday. I want to share with you a little bit about our organization and then get into a couple of issues that I haven't really discussed yet. A couple of new things that I want to bring up with you. We've got a number of major initiatives we're working on. STAND is working on making Constitution Day a federal holiday. Now, it may turn out to be a federal working holiday. Maybe this requires a resolution of some kind. There are some people who are concerned about another non-working day in America, and believe me, that was my hesitation about even proposing it. But finally, thought that on balance, we so desperately need something that educates, unifies, and inspires the American people that it would just be worth it. We'll leave it to the legislators to figure out exactly what kind of holiday they want to craft. But we've got to recognize September 17th as Constitution Day, and that would be a great way to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country. So that's number one. We've also got something called the Family Restoration Institute, which is seeking to address the whole issue of the breakdown of family in America, which is most acute, of course, in the black community, but it's happening across the board, okay? It's affecting every demographic. The only one so far is Asian, and that's because our Asian population has been fairly small, been growing more lately, in part because of illegal immigration. Forgive me, in part because of the illegal alien invasion. I'm going to call it immigration because it's not really immigration. That gives it a legitimacy that it doesn't have. But we've got to rebuild the family in America. It's something that we've got to give attention to. And there have been so many forces against that, between the whole sexual deviancy movement, and just frankly, all of the government policies that have lent themselves to dependence by single women upon the government to take care of them and their children when there's no man in the home. And those policies started, of course, back in 1965 with the Great Society programs, and have really just decimated the black family, decimated it. Because in 1950, only 13% of black children were born out of wedlock. 87% of black children were born to two-parent, monogamous, married mothers and fathers households. Let me get it all in there. Two-parent, monogamous, married mothers and fathers. My grandfather in the 1870s was living in Orange County, Virginia, with my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my great-grandmother, Gabriel and Eliza Jackson. They had an intact family. Now, this stuff that slavery destroyed the black family is a lie. Of course, slavery destabilized some families, no question about that. But again, people don't know the history. American slavery, frankly, much to the consternation of the left, really, in many ways, was much, much better than slavery as it was expressed, particularly in the West Indies, and I dare say probably as it was expressed in Africa as well, for this reason. American slavery was a family affair. See, in the West Indies, it wasn't. It was a corporate affair. Most of the slave owners in the West Indies were absentee owners. It was strictly a business being run by people who were only interested in the bottom line. In America, because it was a family affair and slave masters had the patriarch had their families, their wives, their children, sometimes their mother, the father, all living together, it was a much more delicate situation because you got your kids becoming friends with little slaves. You've got the families developing in the slave community, and now you've got your family sort of seeing how the husbands and wives and children of these black families are being treated. The dynamic was just different. And in addition to that, since you've got a closed economy there, if you break up a family, there are implications to that beyond just the economics. You've got morale issues. You've got issues of people wanting to now escape. You've got issues of people being angry and maybe wanting vengeance. I mean, so it was a much more delicate situation. And yes, some families were broken up. There's no question about that. But that was not in the overwhelming majority of cases because it was so disruptive. And when that happened, it happened usually because the financial crisis of some of these plantations was such that they just felt like they had no choice. And don't get me wrong, I'm not ascribing some great humanitarian motive to hold keeping families intact. All I'm saying is, as a practical matter, it was a dangerous, at the very least, a destabilizing thing to do. Whereas in the West Indies, nobody cared because the owners weren't there, their families weren't there. They were just turning out products. They were growing tobacco and cotton and whatever products they needed to grow. And if one got worked to death and died, they just moved on. In fact, it created a great deal more independence for slaves there too, because there was no home for slaves to live in. There was no plantations for slaves to live on per se. You had to look out for yourself. In other words, there was no patriarch there to say, well, let's make sure that our slaves are being treated humanely. We don't want to give the wrong impression here. No. Not nearly as prevalent in the West Indies. And so it was a much meaner and much more cold-blooded system there. But it also, frankly, instilled in, I think this is part of the legacy, people of the West Indies also instilled a much more independent streak because people really were forced to fend for themselves, to heat, to fish, to hunt, to grow their own crops, to build their own cabins in order to survive, in order to create a decent living arrangement for themselves, or the best living arrangement possible. Whereas in America, the American slave system, all of that was provided. So, at any rate, forgive me for taking a walk down history lane. As you all know, I am a student of history. I don't call myself an expert, but I'm certainly a student of history, and I'm constantly studying history because I find it fascinating and much more complex than people want to make it. I got off on all of that talking about what? Oh, man. What was I talking about? I started, talking about STAND, talking about our organization and what we're doing. So at any rate, I said, we've got Constitution Day that we're focused on. And then we've got the Family Restoration Institute. That's how I got on that, talking about the Family Restoration Institute. In fact, we're doing two things. I'm having a weekly Family Restoration Institute meeting with a group of men, primarily in my church, but others are invited as well. And I'm also teaching a weekly class at the Maximum Potential Christian Academy on restoration of the family. What is a family? That's what we're calling that this is for the younger kids. So remember, we're going to be doing this at various age groups because part of the issue is to not just we're looking generations down the road to how do we rebuild families? How do we instill in children who have never experienced a happy, stable, two-parent, monogamous home where their mother, their actual biological father, their biological mother is there. Children never experience that. How do they know what it looks like? How do they know how to build it? That's what the Family Restoration Institute is all about. Instilling in children family values and family vision, even though they have not experienced that. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that because I was born into a broken home, raised in foster care. Then after foster care, left foster care at the age of 10 years old and raised by my single father. I never had any kind of picture of what a healthy family looked like. Not even my foster home wasn't really a healthy family, frankly. I mean, they managed to stay together, but it wasn't really a healthy situation in many ways. I saw things and experienced things I shouldn't have seen or experienced. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't molested or anything like that. No problems like that. But and I wasn't physically abused. I just got hit one time by my foster father. He clocked me, boy. He clocked me good. I saw lights. Yeah, and I won't get into that story. So, suffice to say, I think that might have been a precipitating factor too, that really got my biological father thinking I got to get him out of there, because I'd gotten to a point where they could not handle me. That's what led to Willie clocking me. They couldn't handle me, and he was probably frustrated because I paid no attention to him whatsoever. But my point is, I didn't have the experience of a stable family, but I've been married for 55 years. Now, that's the grace of God, okay? God just had mercy on me, but also because of my own childhood experience, I had made up my mind, if I ever got married, and growing up part of the time, I said I wasn't going to ever get married because I didn't see anything that I thought, boy, it's a mess. Because that was all I knew. It's a mess. And for a long time, I said, I'm not getting into that. I'm not, no, indeed. I ever tell you that? Yeah, that's the truth. For a long time, as a teenager, I said, man, that's the last thing in the world I need. I got enough problems as it is. Who needs to get married and deal with all that mess? But then I fell in love with my wife, and marriage started to look pretty good. But I began our marriage with this commitment, and I was a heathen through and through. But I began our marriage with this commitment. I was never going to do to my children what was done to me. I was never going to have my children wondering, well, where's my father? Does he love me? Why isn't he with me? Why isn't he taking care of me? I said, once I marry, that's it. I'm in it for the duration. Now, I wasn't a Christian then, but it was just a practical thing of not wanting to inflict on my children the hurt that I felt, because I think I've shared with you all for a long time. I thought to myself, well, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't my mother want to take care of me? Why doesn't my father want to take care of me? What's wrong with me? Why am I with these people who aren't my parents? And part of what I think made me so rebellious was my attitude was, well, if my mother and father are here to tell me what to do, why should I listen to anybody else? And off I went into the streets. A little petty criminal and gang member by the age of 10. I know, it seems, how could that possibly be? But believe me, folks. And that was back in the 1950s, well, late 50s, because I was born in 52, so that early 60s. And can you imagine what it's like now with kids growing up in some of these unstable homes with young mothers who they're still trying to raise themselves, let alone raise children? Can you imagine what the lives of some of those children is like? I mean, so in many ways, Johnson certainly, Lyndon Johnson, that is, he certainly got full political control of the black community, no question about that. But at a horrible cost to the black community, because he decimated the most important institution in any country, in any community, which is the family. Without that, you got chaos. And that's what you got in the inner cities of our country, chaos. Now, not everybody who's born is in a broken home is out committing crimes. Only a small percentage apparently are. But it just creates a whole pathological culture that feeds into the crime and feeds into the bad behavior. Because you don't have dads there saying, son, this is what it means to be a man. This is what it means to be law-abiding. This is what it means to conduct yourself in a responsible way. This is what it means to take responsibility for your own life and not start making excuses and everything as somebody else's fault. This is what it means. My father modeled that for me once I went to live with him, because I saw my father get up and go to work every single day. I saw my father tell welfare agencies who would come through the community trying to pass out cheese and milk. And my father would say, I work for a living. I don't need that. Because he felt like I take responsibility for myself and my son. I take care of us. He wouldn't have the government stepping in any way. They were not welcome. I say I'm conservative. I'm not conservative because some Republican plucked me up. I'm conservative because I had a very conservative father. Very traditional in his views about everything. You look at me, when you see me and you hear me, you're hearing Bill Jackson. Only difference is he was a Roosevelt Democrat. and that look, you weren't shaking him from that because he had been through the Depression. And Roosevelt created those CC camps. And my father used to say I grew 6 inches at the age of 21 years old because it was the first time in my life that I had 3 meals a day and got a good night's sleep. And he spent 6 months in the CC camp and grew 6 inches. And he credited Roosevelt with that. So my father was a Democrat. Now, when I told him I'd become a Republican, you know, I thought, oh my goodness. I said, boy, this is going to be World War III. And my father just said, well, son, it's a different world now. Supported me completely. So at any rate, all of that was by way of presumably telling you about staying true to America's national destiny. So the Family Restoration Institute, Constitution Day. Now, we've got a program called Deracializing America. By the way, you know, the Family Restoration Institute grew out of America's Forgotten Children, and we're still doing this, chronicling all these children that are being murdered in the inner cities since the Defund the Police movement began. It's over 650 now. Over 650. But now we've got a project called Deracializing America, and we're about to kick off our first project under that rubric. And that project is the King Douglas Forum. And what we're going to do is go into these inner cities and hold meetings. You could call them kind of Charlie Kirk style or Turning Point USA style meetings. In other words, in which we have open forums and we have people talking about the issues and giving their perspective. And really challenging what I consider to be what is. Challenging the cult-like adherence to the Democrat Party and its principles. Stand is a nonprofit, of course, so you know we're not going in just to deal with that, but it's really the underlying principles. And so, for example, we will put it out there and discuss, and then they'll get a conservative viewpoint from me and others that I invite. You know, is racism a matter of the heart? Is a function of systems built to perpetuate racial stereotypes and discrimination? Of course, the left says, no, racism is systemic in America. It's woven into the fabric of our culture. No, it is not. It is not. Racism is a matter of an individual thinking and an individual heart problem. And this idea that everything is racist and everybody's racist and the atmosphere is racist and I'm a victim of racism, all that does is debilitate and divide people. That's all it does. Boy, that's right off the Holy Ghost presses. There it is. That attitude debilitates and divides. Debilitates the people who buy into it as victims and divides them from everybody else. Things like what should be the relationship between members of the minority community or the inner city and the police? because this whole defund the police movement and treating the police as hostile occupiers has led to the deaths of more innocent black folks and particularly children, because the more you demoralize the police, the more you limit the police, the more you defund the police, the more you try to do away with the police, guess what? The more criminals take over. I mean, these people are living in la la land to think that there's somehow you remove the police and everybody, oh, now that the police are gone, we're not going to go out and rob. We're not going to deal drugs anymore. We're not going to rape anybody. We're going to be good people, because, you know, it was really the presence of the police that kind of drove us to it. Yeah, right. Discuss DEI policies. Discuss the transgender policies. Discuss the history of the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party was the party of slavery, the party of segregation, the party of the Ku Klux Klan, the Democrat Party, and it hasn't changed. They've just put on a new cloak for their racist ideology. Because the cloak before was, well, you are inferior and therefore you belong in slavery. The cloak now is, well, you may not be inherently inferior, but as a practical matter you are, because you can't pass tests like everybody else can, and you can't achieve like everybody else can, and you can't accomplish like everybody else can. But that's because the system is systemically racist. But don't worry, we'll make it up for you. We will give you affirmative action. We'll give you DEI. We'll give you special treatment. We'll race norm your tests. We won't hold you to the same standard as everybody else, because that's not fair. I mean, we know you're equal to everybody else, wink, wink, nod, nod, but we know you're really inferior, so don't worry. Don't worry. The great white father will take care of you. The great white liberal father will take care of you. Forgive me, folks, but I mean, that's, you know, it is the same attitude. It's the attitude of a slave master. And you know what the part of the proof of that is? Why they absolutely hate people like me. I mean, just hate us with a vengeance. Because that's what I said. They hate Winsome Sears running for governor here, which is why we got to get her elected. Because she's not whining about, oh, I'm a victim of racism. I mean, Barack Obama was president 8 years and whined the whole 8 years about being a victim of racism. I mean, and you just, you know, you want to sit him down and say, look, man, if I can call you that, you're not insulted by that, I hope. Look, man, you are the most powerful person in the world. You were made the most powerful person in the world by the people of the United States of America, the nation that you call systemically racist. Why don't you stop whining, you and your wife, about being victims? I remember she said, Barack could get shot at a gas station. Yeah, by some other black guy who probably was released from prison or not required to give bail after having been accused of and having their evidence presented that he committed a violent crime, probably released out on the streets to kill somebody else. Yeah, you're right. He could get killed at a gas station because the liberals have basically treated black people like they're zoological experiments, so they can go out and slaughter each other, and, you know, it's okay because it's racial justice or some such nonsense. But he just whined the whole, both of them whine, oh, woe is me, oh, we live in such. And Winsome Sears is not doing that, and I'm not doing that. And that's why they hate our guts, hate people like her, hate people like me, because we're not doing that. Because we know we live in the greatest nation on earth. And we know while it's not perfect, we know there is no better place on earth for us to fulfill our God-given potential. And we know that our ability to rise is based upon our willingness to work hard, to sacrifice, to be responsible, to treat other people well, and so forth. Not because, well, you know, they wouldn't let me because I'm black. I can't stand that kind of victim mentality. You're defeated before you even start. Nor this mindset that because, well, the world ought to be a perfect place, and everybody ought to like me, and everybody ought to want to help me. And when they don't, it's because they're racist. Oh, please. The world is an imperfect place. You know, my father used to say to me, he said, son, there will be people who will be against you for whatever reason. And there's not a human being in the world who hasn't faced that. Not a single human being in the world who hasn't faced that. People being against you because they just don't like you. You know, there are studies that show that good-looking people do better than people who are not particularly maybe striking in their appearance or shall we say, and forgive me, but let's just deal with reality, who aren't attractive in their appearance, that attractive people do better in life, right? So a beautiful woman has some advantages that a woman who is not beautiful does not have, right? Of course, because people want to be around her. People want to be in her presence. But you know what? The most beautiful, the most charming, the most gorgeous woman, forget the color of her skin. She could be blonde hair, blue eyes. She could be coconut skin. She could be, coconut skin. She could be very light skin. She could be very dark, but beautiful, striking, you know, you name it. Charming, loving, caring, decent. And she will have enemies. This is just life. She will have people who don't want to see her advance. People who don't like her. I mean, believe me, I still struggle with the idea that there are people who don't like me. How could that possibly be? Right? I'm so warm. I'm so charming. I'm so easy to get along with. How could anybody not like me? I mean, folks, you know, you just want to say to people, grow up. Just grow up. My goodness gracious. This is just the world we live in. So at any rate, we're starting this project, the King Douglas Forum, to discuss these issues in a kind of Turning Point USA style, where we give people an opportunity to defend their positions on issues. I'm sure you've seen some of the videos of these roving reporters asking, okay, so what is a fascist? Well, how is President Trump a king? Well, I'm having a little bit of a hard time thinking of examples right now, but there's never any substantive answer, ever. You know why? Because there aren't any. Because they're caught up in their own sort of pathological indoctrination to think a certain way. They can't defend it with evidence. They can't defend it with facts because there are none. We want to take that into the inner cities and start asking people, does it make sense to hate, to defund, to dismantle the police when doing so gets more black people killed? Does it make sense to make the police the enemy when the fact of the matter is a very, 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 very small percentage of people who die by violence die at the hands of black folks who die by violence, die at the hands of the police? Infinitesimal. I think it's about a fraction of a percent. And the overwhelming majority are killed by criminals, black criminals. 94% of black people who are murdered by black criminals or by other black people. And they're not the police. But, you know, you would think that, you know, all these black people dying in America, thousands of them every year, and this is the police just going out wiping them out. No, the police have nothing to do with it. In fact, the police are responsible for saving many of their lives by getting murderers off the street. None of these idiot courts and judges just release them back on the street, go kill, go rape, go rob somebody else. But to have those kinds of discussions, it's going to take money to do that, folks. That's part of our project, Deracializing America. There are going to be other aspects to it as we unfold this, but this is the first leg of this. the King Douglas Forum, where we have people actually discussing these issues and being forced to defend themselves, being forced to defend their adherence to the Democrat Party, for example. In what way does it reflect your values? How has the Democrat Party helped you and your family? Well, I'd love to hear somebody answer that one. What did Barack Obama do for the black community? The first black president of the United States. Now, that's why I don't even want to hear that. Now, you know, when I talk about Winsome Sears, I mean, yeah, she is. When she's elected governor, she will be the first black woman to be elected governor. I was reminded of Doug Wilder. I'd forgotten about him, to tell you the truth. Somebody said, well, wait a minute, she won't be the first black governor. Doug Wilder was the first. That's true. So she would be the second. She would certainly be the first woman governor and the first black woman governor. But you know what, folks, I'm past that. I really am. I'm past it. You know, she's the first black this. She's the first black that. I just don't. And I understand people want to mark these things, but I just want to see us be Americans and talk about her accomplishments as an American, as somebody who has overcome obstacles, as somebody who has dealt with all kinds of challenges, as anybody who achieves anything always does, regardless of the color of their skin. I know people would have you think that some white guy succeeds and it's just that handed to him on a silver platter and the red carpet is rolled out and then he walks to success. But when it's a black guy, oh, it's just a struggle, you know, to all kinds of obstacles. He's got to, well, that's just a lie and a myth. No human being accomplishes anything without hardship and obstacles and pain and problems and mistakes, without revelations of their own character weaknesses. I mean, man, I can get into a self-revelation thing here, but I'll tell you what, I know all too well what, and here I'm 73 years old, I know all too well what my character weaknesses are. I know all too well what I've got to watch. Praise God, I'm doing pretty well at it, but I know I am not a perfect human being by any stretch of the imagination. That situation happened just, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, in which I kind of got a little beside myself and flew off the handle a little bit. Yeah, I did. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't curse people out, and I don't, call people out of their names or anything like that. But I can get a little aggressive. I know. You can't imagine it, can you? You Bishop Jackson, you E.W., I cannot imagine it. Well, that passion can burn hot. Some occasionally in the wrong way when I feel, a little bit. And sometimes I'll make a mistake and get a little too aggressive. But so look, there's none of us that doesn't face obstacles. And by the way, here again, I can't say when something like that happens, and thank God it's very, 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 very rare, but I can't say when something like that happens, the white man made me do it. No, but at any rate, folks, we got to deracialize America. We got to end all this preoccupation with skin color and all this preoccupation with people of the BIPOCs, the black indigenous people of color. We're going to celebrate Columbus Day in my country because Columbus is one of the people God used to set in motion the things that would bring about this great nation, this providential nation. So I'm not going to stop celebrating Columbus Day as a black indigenous people of color. Give me a break. How about human beings? That's all I'm interested in, human beings. Okay, all right. At any rate, I said all that to say, you know what, I still haven't gotten to the issues, have I? I hope my, my free associating has been interesting, and inspiring, and informative, and maybe even a little entertaining. But if you want to help us with these projects, go to standamerica.us, standamerica.us. If you are not already a Patriot Partner, sign up as a Patriot Partner. And by the way, doing that is just, when you give, you become a Patriot Partner. We used to distinguish between monthly givers as Patriot Partners and everybody else. Now, everybody's a Patriot Partner, but you can become a monthly Patriot Partner, monthly donor as a Patriot Partner by giving at least $5 a month. You can sign up for that. And believe me, you think $5 a month, how's that going to help? It encourages us, because it means that there are people out there we know that maybe they don't have much in the way of financial resources, but they believe in what we're doing and they're willing to share some of those resources with us to help us keep doing it. Of course, as I've said before, I'm believing God for stock gifts. The stock market has done pretty well here in the Trump era. And if you want to make a gift of stock, you can do that. We have a stock account. You can make a gift of stock to Stand. We're believing God for estate donors, people who include us in their will so that when they go home to be with the Lord, presumably go home to be with the Lord, they leave some portion of their estate to Stand to help us with the work that God has called us to do. We're believing God for endowment donors. And that means people who can give $250,000, $500,000, $1 million or more to the work of Stand, to get us off the treadmill of constantly having to try to figure out ways to ask to get money, and instead create a whole framework that automatically continues to generate the revenues that we need to run the organization, and perhaps even provides us with an endowment that we can use the principal to make up for any deficits, maybe in a slow year where maybe we don't raise as much, but that money is always there to help us. That's what an endowment donor could do for us, unless they just give the entire amount to us for our operating expenses, or they could give it as an endowment, and we could use the interest off of that primarily to meet whatever budgetary needs we have, and then it would always be that money there to give the organization stability and to assure its longevity. And then last but certainly not least, I'm looking for 1,000 monthly Patriot Partners, 1,000 who give on a monthly basis, because I'm a big believer in the power of small donors, because they tend to be stable. My experience, having done this now for going on 17 years, it's still 16 years. It'll be 17. I'm at 20. Yeah. Well, actually, 16 years. Is that small donors, while as individuals, they don't make much of a financial impact on the organization, as a group, they make a major impact. As a group, they make a major impact, and that they're much more stable than the large donor. The large donor will tend to give once, twice, maybe even 3 times. Then they tend to move on. They tend to take the attitude, well, I've invested a lot. You got to find other people who will do that. Whereas the small donors will be with you from month to month, year to year. We've got people who have been donating to our organization on a monthly basis for a decade. And boy, that means a lot. So those are the areas, and you may say, well, I'm not in a position to be that $1 million donor, that endowment donor. Pray for us that the Lord will raise those people up to do for us what needs to be done. Okay? All right. standamerica.us is the number, standamerica.us. Pray, volunteer, and give. Pray for us. You want to volunteer, you can start a Stand chapter. You can become a Stand ambassador. By the way, if you become a Stand ambassador, next time I want to show you the beautiful official pin we're giving out. If you've seen me in a suit, you've seen me because I wear my pin, my Stand pin is always on my lapel on my suit when I'm wearing a suit. And you'll get one when you become an ambassador or you become a chapter. You start a chapter. You'll get an official. It's the official officer's pin. So you become an officer in Stand. Standamerica.us. If you want to volunteer, call 757-439-1458. 757-439-1458 if you want to volunteer, you want to become an ambassador, you want to start a chapter, etc. Okay. All right. I think that that's it for all of that stuff, which is taking up most of the program today. But look, let me get to a couple of things that I really want to get to. And I can do this in the time that we've got. You heard about this guy who had the Nazi tattoo. He's a candidate for Senate up in Maine. And he had the Nazi tattoo. And apparently he has had that covered, said that he put that on when he was inebriated. This guy's a piece of work. Graham Plattner, Marine Corps veteran. Brother. Can't say I'm very proud of this one. But did you hear Bernie Sanders justify this in saying, well, you know, he went through a dark period in his life. Now, you and I, they are happy to call Nazis, Christian nationalists, and me, I think I can probably speak for you too, an avid supporter of Israel and the Jewish people, but I'm a Nazi. Okay? And I don't get any kind of pass. This guy, he's got a Nazi symbol on his chest, tattooed on his chest. He gets a pass, so he went through a dark period. Oh boy, their hypocrisy knows no bounds. It knows no bounds. But Christians who love our country, they're Christian nationalists. And by the way, that phrase Christian nationalism, that's supposed to be a cute way of calling you a Nazi. That's what they're getting at. In fact, one of these liberal spokespersons said that Nazis love Jesus. So basically the notion is that we Christians were just Nazis who love Jesus. Again, don't ask me to explain that, because I've said logic, facts, truth don't have anything to do with the Democrat Party. They traffic in lies and fantasy and propaganda that has as disconnected from reality as you can get. But as far as I'm concerned, this guy is just like Jay Jones here in Virginia, who apologized for his calling for the death of Todd Gilbert after he got caught. And this guy now, oh no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not a Nazi. Yeah, after it was learned that he had a Nazi tattoo. Now all of a sudden, you know, I am against anti-Semitism. You know, give me a break. These Democrats are full of the devil, and you cannot trust them, folks. You cannot trust them. You cannot trust them to be honest. You cannot trust them to try to serve the American people with any kind of decency or sincerity, because they worship the God of power, and that God demands that they sacrifice everything and everybody to its altar. And that includes you and me, that includes the American people, and that includes our country. So I hope that people see through this nonsense, you know, the excuses being made for this idiot. And then he said, you know, they're going to call me a communist because anytime you try to do something to benefit working people, these people are really living in la la land. They really are. I mean, they really are. You know what the best thing you can do to benefit working people? Have a robust, vibrant economy of low inflation, of high employment, plenty of employment opportunities, good educational institutions that actually educate people rather than seek to indoctrinate them. That's the best thing you can do for the working person, because you know what the working person wants to be? They want to be upwardly mobile. They want to be able to earn more, save more, take care of their families, take care of their children, send their kids off to, presumably, to a college that's actually going to educate them. Yeah. We don't call you a communist because you want to benefit the working people, if that's what you have in mind. we call you a communist when you start talking like Mamdani. You want to take over the grocery stores. You want to make everything free. You want to close down Rikers Island. You want to dismantle the police. You want to send social workers and psychologists out to domestic dispute incidents. You know, cops get killed at these domestic dispute situations. That's what makes you a communist, that you subscribe to Marxism, that you don't respect private property, that you don't respect free enterprise, and that you don't respect individual responsibility for one's actions. You somehow think it's all society's fault. Because these are the ideas that Karl Marx propounded. And Democrats have bought into them, lock, stock, and barrel, pretty much. So communism is a demonic cult. The Democratic Party is a demonic cult because the Democratic Party pretty much is communist these days. I said they've always been a demonic cult. But I guess fascism and communism are two sides of the same coin anyway. Okay, let me leave that. Here's the last thing I want to mention to you. I've got to get to the White House ballroom. I got to get to that. I think Josh Hawley had the best response to all of this consternation over the White House ballroom. He wants to be a king. And people have been pointing out there have been 5 major renovations to the White House. 5. Remember, the White House was pretty much destroyed in the War of 1812. But since then, since it was rebuilt, there have been 5 major renovations. I mean, they've added bowling alleys. They've added basketball. Obama added a basketball court. They've added swimming pools. They removed swimming pools. Truman apparently had the biggest renovation, really bigger than this, because Trump is just building a ballroom. Bigger than this. But Truman did something bigger than this. I mean, because he apparently kind of rebuilt the whole West Wing. Here's what I want to get to. I think Josh Hawley had the best response to this. You mean to tell me the people who are prepared to tear down the statues of George Washington, of Thomas Jefferson, of Theodore Roosevelt, of Frederick Douglass, of Abraham Lincoln, of all of those who fought in the Civil War on the Confederate side, they are part of our history, like it or not. They are part of the history of America. And we ought to be studying these things and trying to better understand them and understand even why statues were put up of these people. Why would you do that? The country was torn apart, 600,000 lives lost, because that was the price of reconciliation. The recognition that these people weren't all evil, fighting to maintain the evils of slavery. They were simply fighting because they believed they owed their first loyalty to their states in many, many cases. I think Stonewall Jackson is really one of the greatest figures that America's ever produced. He was on the wrong side of history, but he was a brilliant general and a very, very decent and compassionate man. And by the way, opposed to slavery and wanted to see it end. But yet he fought on the side of Virginia. Why? Because he felt he owed his loyalty to Virginia. Well, how do you, after killing each other to the tune of hundreds of thousands, how do you come back together? There's got to be some recognition, some rapprochement, some sense that, well, we understand you're not all evil, and this has been a terrible chapter in our history. We recognize your bravery and your virtue. You recognize ours. Let's come together as Americans again. How do you do that after a 4-year civil war? But again, people aren't interested in the nuances of history. I've got to get ready to go. But I'd simply point this out. These are the folks who also claim the White House was built by slave labor. I have no doubt that probably some slaves were involved in the building of the White House. I mean, during the slavery era, anything that happened in the South, probably slaves were involved, probably. But now all of a sudden, they are good. The East Wing is sacred and you're destroying history. I mean, these people are literally, folks, schizophrenics. I would think this house built by slave labor, you'd want to see it torn down. Well, if given the right moment, they probably would. I'm glad Trump is building this ballroom because I'll tell you something. Given the condition given the left's mentality and mindset, if something big needs to happen where hundreds of people are going to be brought in for some sort of celebration or some state event, I'd rather it be done at the White House than somewhere else because I know the president and the people who attend are going to be more secure at the White House than they will be anywhere else. What is the problem? He's destroying the history of the legacy. Oh, give me a break. The people who want to destroy pretty much every aspect of American history because they say America is systemically racist and was founded to perpetuate slavery. And now they're going to lecture us and tell us he can't do that because we're destroying our history. I mean, folks, what a joke. I guarantee you, presidents to come are going to be so glad that they have a ballroom at the White House. Because it's going to make it so easier for them to plan big events that they want to do without having to leave the confines and the secure confines of the White House to go do it. So not only is it going to beautify the White House, it's going to add to the security of the presidency. I'm glad he's doing it. And then he's not using taxpayer dollars. Oh, he's being bought by all these rich people. Well, it's interesting. He didn't say that about Barack Obama. I mean, when he was raising money for his library, you didn't hear them complaining about that. They didn't even complain about Joe Biden when his son was out collecting all this money from all these foreign countries. There's no proof that anything wrong has been done. But now all of a sudden, Trump is being bought. The billionaire, many times over now. What is he worth now? $5, $6, $7 billion? He's being bought off. Oh, give me a break. Folks, God bless you. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to be at 943 Canal Drive on Sunday morning at the Call Church. If you're looking for a church that is centered on the Word of God and follows it wherever it leads us, we're the place you want to be. Don't give your tithe, your time, and your talent to a church that won't speak up on the issues of the day and give the biblical perspective on those issues. Don't do that. You're wasting what God has given you. If you're looking for a church where we're going to stand on the Word of God and we don't care what happens or who doesn't like it or what people do, we're going to stand on the Word of God because Jesus said heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will never pass away. I'll be there at 11 o'clock, 943 Canal Drive. We'll start live streaming about 11:15. I'm teaching on the book of Hebrews. We're starting chapter 2 on Sunday. So come on by. We'd love to see you. In the meantime, you know what to do. Stand up, step up, speak up, and refuse to back up. Because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. Because we are on God's side. God bless everybody.